Okay, guys, welcome back to our fourth episode of Back to Base, the podcast. We have got our third guest, and that is the one and only Dr. Professor, the Genius. What do we call him? Is that any of those ringing bells? It's Andrew Locke.
He'll take all of them.
Oh man, I've got the Reverend as well. Don't forget the Reverend.
The Reverend, welcome.
Let's stick with that one. So we've got the Reverend Andrew Locke, who, if you've been following Australian Strength Coach, which is me, you will know. And actually, he features a lot on the Base Body Babes page.
Yeah, we love Andrew Locke.
But we've been working with Andrew for the last few years. And before we get him to introduce himself, I'm going to tell you guys how I met him. So a few years ago at our old gym, that was Base Gym in North Sydney, I got an email from Andrew Locke saying, is it okay if I come down to Base Gym and treat my patients from Sydney, because Andrew's from Melbourne? And I thought, okay, I'm always welcoming guests to our gym, but I didn't know who he was. And we had a physiotherapist at our gym, and I said to him, this was Paulie Exides, and I said, hey, Paulie, have you heard of Andrew Locke? And he's like, that's the man, like, get him in. What did he say? Why do you ask? And it's like, okay, well, he's emailed me and he's asked me if he could treat his patients from our gym. And he's like, 100% you need to get this guy in. He's the man. It's like, wow, okay. So I asked a few more people, and the general consensus that I got was, I went to this physio, I went to that chiropractor, I had this injury, and then I went to Andrew Locke and now I'm fixed. And it's like, wow, this guy's got quite the reputation. Anyway, so I was really excited to meet this guy. And finally he came down, I showed him my gym. I was training, I was deadlifting that day. And I thought, you know what, of course I trust Andrew. He's a professional. I know he knows what he's doing, so he can make himself at home. And I pointed him to our treatment room, which has our treatment bed. It's got our massage table. And I said, Andrew, here's all the weights over here, but there's the room for you. That's all yours today. And he looked at it and he said, right, well, I won't be using that. It's like, I didn't know what he meant. I thought he was just cracking some kind of joke with me. And I thought, okay. Anyhow, so it's like, all good, Andrew. Well, it's, my house is your house and whatever. And I started training deadlifts, and what do you know? Andrew's got his patients all day long, back to back, from 9 to 5, and he's using the weights floor. He's got his patients, and he's lifting weights with them, like mainly deadlifting.
He barely even went into the office, I don't think.
Yeah, and at the end of the sessions, they came and they did the Instagram thing. They come and they say, do you mind if we get a photograph with you and Andrew? And it's like, okay, sure. So they took the photograph with them them in the middle, Andrew on one side, me on the other side, doing the flex, and they'd post us on Instagram, and they'd say things like, got to train at Base Gym, and I got to have my first treatment with Andrew Locke. I've been in pain for however many months. One session with Andrew, and I walked away deadlifting pain-free. It's like, wow, okay, that's a very different approach to physiotherapy, one that I didn't really think of. I just thought physiotherapy was like press here, massage there, put a few pins in and electrodes or whatever it is, and that's physiotherapy treatment, but not with Andrew. And I loved that. And since then, we've been working together. We've been running seminars all around Australia. And
it's been a few years now?
It's probably my best collaboration that I've, apart from Base Body Babes and Australian Strength Coach.
Of course, you have to put us first.
But apart from that, it's without a doubt the best professional collaboration that I've had. And now it's such an honour to have you on our podcast. And I know, that's an introduction, and I know a lot of the people that are following us know who you are, but for those who don't, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Seriously, man, we haven't got that much time.
We've got all the time.
I can seriously. Oh man, I was just remembering it goes back a long way. I started really in life expecting to be a professional baseball player, because I played for Australia as a junior, and I was actually had left school and gone to Darwin as a semi-professional, expecting to go off to play in an American league in the next season. And I saw a fucking muscle and fitness magazine with Arnold on the cover, and that was the end of my baseball career. I decided I was going to become the next freaking Conan the Barbarian.
Just like every young guy wanted.
Man, shit, 25, 30 years later, I still haven't made a Barbarian movie. Failure. And so, I fell in love with weights. Now, at that point, I was almost going to become a professional wrestler as well. So there was a few things there. I got scouted to go to the States. And I decided that I'd get a career in the meantime just as a backup. And that was what physio was. But as I was going through, I realised that no one who was teaching us knew anything about what I was doing, which was lifting weights. I was bench pressing, deadlifting and squatting and loving it. And so that became the real interesting part. Was I was already on a divergence to the rest of the profession, which was traditionally just running around after footy players and tennis players and rugby players and things like that. I was probably at the right point at the right time where our professions now, you look at the osteos, the chiros, the physios, the exercise physiologists, the myos, everyone's weight training. So I was lucky enough to be there at this moment in time when I think a lot of professions started to change. And there's a lot more change that needs to come. Yeah, and I can remember that first time I came to your gym. I mean, I came there and there wasn't a Pilates reformer anywhere. What the fuck was I going to do? I'm a physio. Man alive. What the hell is Pilates?
So that is right. There's a lot of things that we don't have in our gym. We consider that we've got a strength gym, but I don't really say that any other method's really wrong. It's just kind of what we prefer, which is probably why really you and I kind of gelled with each other. We're both kind of preaching the same thing. Something that I liked what you say is strength cannot, weakness will not be tolerated. And that very much aligned with me from the very first time I met you. So it leads me to my first question that I've got to ask you is, where is it that you succeed and other professionals fail?
Well, the big reason is the same reason that you're a success. We're both following our passions without negotiation on anything else. We're not driven by money as much as the desire to do what we do to the best of our ability. And that's what you do, and that's why you're a success. When it really comes down to it, you're going to do what you got to do because you can't live any other way. I'm exactly the same way. I have an absolute burning desire to be the best on the planet at what I do. And what I do is basically understand, diagnose, rehabilitate injured people, predominantly at the moment. Yeah, it's always weight trainers, but then it all, of course, spills over to the rest of the human race. A lot of people say to me, you make it seem so easy and so simple. And as Einstein said, if you know what you're talking about, you can explain it to a 6-year-old. And that's where my success comes from, is it all comes together the more you have a passion for it. So that it's still there. I'm getting better every day, just like yourself. You're lifting better every day. I'm better than I was last week. I've discovered things in the last month that I didn't know. But they're always in the framework of things I have known. So it's not as if I found something that conflicted greatly. I've just found another way to add another layer. So that's why we are the success that we are. I'm passionate about weight training. I'm passionate about fixing things.
It's something that we definitely know. Every time we see you're doing something new, and we're going to get to that later on. Let's paint a picture for our audience that don't have the video. Andrew is a very unique looking guy. He's jacked. His shoulders fill the screen from end to end. He's got a mohawk. He's got a big beard.
He definitely fits the profile of a wrestler. That is for sure.
He has no neck, and he's just jacked. If you take a look at him, you wouldn't really expect him to be the smart guy that he is and as successful as a physiotherapist that he is. But when you get to know him, it all makes sense.
It does. Okay, so
it's part of.
Yeah, go Andrew.
It's us. It's us, isn't it? We are true to ourselves. And that's what we do. That's what you girls do. What you do, which is such a passion. That's what Sebastian does. That's why we are who we are. We haven't negotiated with anyone.
No, you are a unique character and loved by so many. So let's get straight to the fun stuff. We've been in the industry for quite a while now, especially Sebastian. He's been around for a long time. We have heard, and I'm sure you have, and most of the industry professionals that listen to us have heard the myths and the do's and the don'ts in the fitness industry. We want you, Mr. Science, to help us bust those myths. We're going to call it Debunking Movement Myths with Andrew Locke.
What a superb idea.
We want to hear your opinion.
I'm going to start.
Go.
Knees over toes.
Oh dear.
Knees over toes in the squat. Yes, no, and why? Yes or no?
I'll just take a video of any Olympic weightlifting competition. The knees are heading over the toes, aren't they?
Yep.
Yep. So where are they supposed to go? They're not supposed to go there.
Backwards? I don't know.
There's a simple principle, I think, which we should encompass, and it doesn't matter whether it's knees or necks or anything, and this helps us dispel that, is a joint will never go where it shouldn't go anyway. Mm-hmm. If your knee can naturally move over your toe, well, guess what? Evolution gave that to you for a very specific reason. And if you happen to have a freaking long femur and a short toe, or a short torso, not a camel toe, a short torso and a long femur, you're going to have to get that knee out there somewhere to get your centre of mass over your base of support. And that knee's going to move over your toe, and you're going to be a hell of a lot better because you did.
Okay.
Hopefully then you've got a hip structure that associates with it. So, yes, knees can go over toes.
Yeah, that brings us to our next point, the VMO. VMO strengthening for knee rehab. Let's hear your thoughts on this one.
Absolute, complete, total bullshit. There is no shred of evidence that there's ever such a... I mean, I've left something from a gate there open. Have I? No, there's no such muscle as a VMO. It doesn't exist. Now, the thing about it is, when you look back at the studies that described why they called it a VMO, remember, what I need to help the listeners understand is there's a muscle inside of your knee called the VM. That's your vastus medialis. It's not a VMO. The big thing there is your vastus medialis. The O was supposed to be some small fibres in an oblique fashion. Okay, the first studies that were really looking at it were using surface EMGs. They couldn't see under the skin. They're placing surface EMGs on a muscle that's called the VM, and they're calling it an oblique fibre. It was so poorly done. Now, there was a lot of wonderful research done many years ago, now about 10 years ago, which you can hunt up, and it's found out that the problem really was that a lot of the physios who were, was a lady called Jenny McConnell, I think was the original person about 30 years ago, who made this proposition, that a weakness of the muscle on the inside of your knee allowed your kneecap to fall outwards. Well, that was dead wrong, because what they were doing is they were doing open chain studies, not closed chain studies. Put a foot on the ground, you'll see its internal femoral rotation. The femur's falling inwards. The kneecap is not moving outwards. It's a position where it's staying, but the femur's rotating inwards. That's got nothing to do with the muscle on the inside of your knee, but to do with your ass.
Yeah.
So rehab for and using a VMO is a total, complete waste of time and a lot of money. I worked with the best people who are VMO specialists back when I first graduated. 12 months later, they're still doing bullshit step downs on the same patients who aren't getting any better. Mm-hmm. Now, I see a patient once, and a week later, they're better because they started to use their ass to control their femur. So let's stick a stake in that one like a vampire hunter, huh?
Like that.
That one's dead.
That one's dead. You got that one very nicely. Okay, round back deadlifting, good or bad?
It all depends who you are. Mm-hmm. Now, I actually had a patient came in yesterday, funny enough, came from the same place that Konstantinov's came from. She had a humongously big thoracic kyphosis.
So that's KK. Now, that's the famous deadlifter that everyone refers to. For those who don't know, he's sadly passed away, but he's a current world record holder in the 125 kilo class, 426 kilograms, no belt, very rounded back, and a lot of people will refer to this guy when they're talking about round back deadlifting. Continue, Andrew. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I actually think I've seen a little genetic relationship here. And she could control her thoracic kyphosis. When she bent over to pick up a bar, she looked like KK, but she was about 100 kilos smaller. And it is exactly the way she should lift. Now, what do we talk about round back lifting means? There's nothing wrong with bending over and touching your toes. How are you going to do your shoelaces up, unless you've got a good wife, without, bending over and touching your toes and bending your back? You can't do it. So what's wrong with bending your back? Nothing, as long as when you load your spine, that it doesn't bend anymore. There's the game. So that's when we use the word flexion movement and flexion moment. So when you put a load on your spine and it's flexed, nothing wrong about that. But when you start to lift it up, you start to move it, don't let it flex any further. That's called a moment arm. It's like a crane lifting. Now, if you go deep sea fishing and you happen to catch a big marlin out there, you'll see the rod will start to bend the more it loads. That's not the way we lift.
That's a flexion.
There's your round back. movement under load. So that's bad. So we must say flexion moments are fine. Flexion movements under load are not a good idea for the lumbar spine. So it has its two parts. All good.
Great explanation. Now we're going to go on the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about bending in the other direction. Arch back benching in a bench press. Is it good, bad, and why?
Well, essentially, case by case, but in the true main, in the majority, it's the best thing you can do to look after your back. Now, just remember, a structure is more stable if it has an arch than if it has just a simple straight line. So if you look anywhere through the old world, you go hiking and touring through some parts of Europe, you'll always know where Greeks have been because there's lots of straight lines and lots of columns that had to hold up that weight. Well, if you head over to Rome and wander into the Vatican, you'll see that there's a huge dome. It's a big arch and there's no columns holding that up in the middle. You can span a greater area and take more load with an arch. So an arch is in fact a more stable structure than a straight line. Now, when we're bench pressing, we're going to be locking that in with basically everything we have. Intra-abdominal pressure, turning our lats on, our glutes on. We're actually using that spectacularly well to be more stable. Now, you cannot bulge a disc in extension, and most back injuries are flexion injuries. So moving forward under load, creating the disc injury with a few reasons for that. But many studies done, Professor McGill did a lot of them. There's a guy called Adams. They must have busted thousands of discs over the years, but they never created a bulge going into extension, only into flexion. Now, in an arch bench press, you're in extension, so it's not a bad thing. And you're not bending too far back. That's fine. Your body probably has still got a bit to go. And we need it if you're going to be using hip extension anyway under there. So you're connecting yourself in a very sensible way. So yes, arching your back, one of the best things you can learn to do. But once again, like everything we say, you don't put a kid into a Formula One car and expect them not to crash. So with all that technical work, let's put the L plates on. And just earn the right to put the weight on the bar, as you have said.
Well, on that note, talking about kids, the last one we've got for you, lifting weights for children. Yes or no? Is it safe?
Sure. Yeah, sure is very safe. Guess what? Good technique is universal. Teach kids great movement patterns and they'll become excellent adults. And they'll be adults who move very well and they'll be less likely to get injured. So definitely teaching a kid to move under a load with excellent technique, what a wonderful skill to give a kid. Brilliant idea.
Love that.
But don't try and set...
What can be said about weights for children stunting growth? Is that a myth?
Oh, it's probably up there with saying Pilates fixes backs. Basically bullshit.
Okay,
Right.
that's interesting to know. We just had our daughter deadlifting.
And I've had her deadlifting, actually. She's 10 years old and she deadlifted today. Not so heavy. Not so heavy that it was going to break down technique. Of course, she's my daughter.
She's in the back here with her thumbs up.
She's actually started deadlifting at the age of 7. And we started her with a technique bar with 15 kilograms. And I put up a video on social media. And of course, I would never want to hurt my own daughter. And I'm very aware, like I've been working with you for years and I know these things. I just know that you explain them a lot better. But I knew that it was completely safe working with her. And she has been doing it for years. But you still get the odd people on social media, which is unfortunately the way of the future. A lot of people say don't listen to social media. And obviously, we don't take everything on social media as gospel. But there's always going to be the odd person out there that says you're doing the wrong thing, you're going to stunt their growth and all of these things. So,
but we have our daughter who is under very good guidance. A lot of people don't have that luxury. So our advice would be do it with good guidance.
So that's a lot of great things that we've learned from working with
Loved
Andrew.
those Mythbusters.
And one thing, that was great myth busting. So one thing is just kind of moving forward a little bit of myth busting as well. But it's one really important lesson. It's been, I will definitely say it's been a game changer, not just for myself as an athlete or as a coach, but as an online coach and you girls as well, your entire team, all of your members, the way that we warm up our procedures have changed drastically
Since
meeting Andrew. So I will confess, I used to consider stretching as part of a warm-up routine or a cool-down routine, and flexibility as an important part of your overall health. Since working with Andrew, we've very much ditched the stretching in favour of activating, mobilizing, warming up, and then training. It's a very different procedure. Mm-hmm. So stretching is something that I've learned a lot about through Andrew, and instead of me trying to teach the audience, I'm going to ask you, Andrew, what is your take on stretching muscles? Is there ever a benefit? Do you do it? What's your take?
It works with populations of people who have spasticity, neurological problems, but for normal populations, it is certainly detrimental should you be considering you're going to go out and lift. Because only by increasing your stability will you increase your ability. So tightness will protect you. Looseness will endanger you. Mm-hmm. I can remember actually, seriously, I think it was my first year out, and where I was working was the head of the AFL Physio Association. And there was some interesting data coming through. There's teams that had gone through more stretching programs at that point were clearly demonstrating more injuries than any other clubs. So it was being demonstrated with explosive sports, the more you stretched these athletes, the more they were getting injured. So for us, it's very, very much a case of you would have to give me a reason why you need to stretch. So a lot of people come to me who consistently stretch because they feel tight. I say, well, can you tell me why you feel tight? And none of them can. I said, well, there's your answer. You haven't found out why you're tight. All you're doing is fighting your strength. You haven't found your weakness. So wherever tightness is the opportunity to find a weakness that is making your body tight. Your tightness is protecting you. So it's funny, I get people with stiff necks. What are they doing? They're stretching them all the time, which is basically telling the neck, guess what? You've got something offending you, pulling on you. Perhaps you need to tighten up more because something's really pissing you off. I teach people to go the other direction if you got a stiff neck. Move towards the tightness. Guess what? It turns it off. There we are. So the key is, why are you tight? Mm-hmm. So don't stretch. So you need to give me a damn good answer.
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's something that we always say is it's to find what's underperforming. So the tight muscle isn't what's underperforming. That's the muscle that's doing its job. And then people go and switch it off by stretching it, making them more vulnerable for injury.
You have now offended your strength, weakened your strength, and done nothing to address your weaknesses. Get ready to get worse.
Great.
Yeah.
So leading on to the next part of our warm-up procedure that we've learned from you guys, from you in particular, with a lot of research backing everything that you're talking about, and that's activation exercises. For our major joints, every time we do a lower body session, we're loading our spine, we're loading our hips, and we'll do some activations to protect our spine and protect our hips. So the main things are to protect the spine, work on the core. To protect the hips, work on the glutes. Protect the shoulders, we've got a whole bunch of mobility exercises as well. So this is part of the procedure. Can you please explain, how does this help us for our warm-up to activate opposing muscle groups before we train them?
Yes, the concept really is activation is to wake up the primary muscle groups that you're going to have involved. For example, with the approach I take to the lower body work especially, we have demonstrated that with top-level deadlifters, hip rotation or hip torque is a hallmark over everything else. The best lifters have the strongest hip rotation, hip torque. That comes from your glutes performing extension. Weak lifters will compensate, if they don't have that, by overusing their lumbar spines. Now, there's something to that. That's an evolutionary thing why we probably use our spines in that method. Because we're actually moving towards athletic endeavours, we have to actually switch things around and really use our primary strength muscle group for hip torque. All right, so if I'm going to get you to have good hip extension, but you've got a very active lumbar spine, I have to sneak up on your extension by making you do some abduction and external rotation, which is a glutes job. Now, at that point, your lower back's not involved in abduction, external rotation, but your glutes are. Then I'm going to stabilise your core with some plank-style work. So now you're stiffening your core, but I've also turned your glutes on. Then I'm going to make you do a little bit more, and then I'm going to put you into hip extension movements. At that point, I've stiffened your core. I've now got your glutes excited. And when I do hip extension work, I've got a set core and I've got a muscle that's going to extend beautifully. If I just went straight into training and that glute isn't going to extend as well as it should, then I'm going to have a shit pattern and I'm going to set up an impingement pattern perhaps in the lower back, or I may piss off that disc. So the whole concept of activation is to set you up for the most perfect performance loading. That's why we warm up. So the activation precedes the warm-up, which sets the muscle into the pattern, and then we integrate it into the function of loading. So that's why we take so long to do what we do. In fact, there comes back to a little bit of stretching moment there. My concept on some people why they stretch, and you'll have observed this as well, is they're not really stretching. They're sitting down, they're moving, but getting their head space right before they train. It isn't really, they're really trying to stretch anything. They're getting head space. They're sitting down for 20 minutes, half an hour, and they've got to get their head space right. So what are they going to do? That's what they call stretching. Realistically, they're just feeling themselves move. It's more a mental game, I think. I think you'll observe that with some of your lifters as well. It's a mental game before you start lifting.
And I think we've had a lot of success and a lot of great feedback since introducing the core and glute activation routines prior to all of our workouts. It's actually included in all of our programming now across Base Body Babes and Australia.
I'm going to take it further. So everyone knows our audience. I've got a lot of elite level athletes.
Yeah, Thor does it.
And Thor does it, and he's the strongest man on the planet. Yeah. But we also use these activations. Actually, I see you in the morning. We've got Felicia training my daughter a lot of the times at home.
She runs me through it now.
She's doing our activation. So
she's amazing.
We use that as an example. From the absolute beginner to the most elite in the world, we're using these exercises. They're not too cool or they're not too difficult for any genre, any level of experience. And we've had a lot of great success. So I would have to say, for those who want to know the different types of activations that we're talking about, a lot of them would be posted up on your Instagram page. Is that right, Andrew?
Absolutely. I've shot a lot of video on the core work. Great. And it's all on there.
We're always tagging Andrew with that as well.
We'll put your tags on there so everyone knows where to go to. But I would definitely urge all of the listeners to go on Andrew's
They are
page
a must do.
Yeah, they're a must do.
Core and glute activation routine.
It's been a game changer
absolutely
for us.
Andrew.
It is for all of us. Yes,
I'm going to change the topic. Something a little bit taboo.
A little bit personal.
A little bit personal. Actually, it's something that I experience all the time, and I just wanted to chat with you about weeing on the platform. Like, it's the elephant in the room for females, for women. It's definitely the elephant in the room.
Boys don't do it.
No, you do other things. But no, weeing on the platform. Is it normal?
No, it's not very normal.
Okay.
And it is something that we...
Well, is there a way that we can fix it?
Let's put a bit of context to this. You don't just get up and piss on the
platform. No, I don't.
She's busting and she needs to go.
I'm talking about heavy loads.
It's when she's lifting, usually heavy deadlifts, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm going to say deadlifting over squatting, actually.
When it goes really heavy and you're going to maximal loads, and it's not just you. We're using you as an example. We don't want to throw any other women under the bus. But you know what?
We've seen it many.
But I'm quite happy to talk about it.
It's happening over and over. You go to any major powerlifting competition or weightlifting competition, that's what you're going to see. Women lifting really, really heavy loads. And then followed by, in most instances, urinating on the platform during the biggest, the sticking point, the most strenuous point of the lift. Is it normal?
Wow, you've totally nailed it there, Sebastian. You've actually defined it perfectly. You'll probably notice it happens more with sumo, by the way, than conventional.
Yes, I do.
Well, she's a sumo lifter.
All right. So what you picked out there was the identical thing. It happens at the hardest part of the lift under the greatest load. So it's not normal. That's when you're approaching abnormal levels of strength. Okay.
Thank you.
Solution to the problem.
Yeah.
There is one. All right. There's a couple realistically, but the most effective, what we're talking about here, is how to really stop this happening and minimize it. You find the weak point in your lift when you are having that problem. Identify where it is in the lift. At that point in your training, you need to take a lighter load at that specific point, practice holding your pelvic floor, hard and work that range.
Right. Okay.
You'll find you're getting, and this comes back to the scientific principle, specific adaptation to impose demand. You have a specific problem under a specific demand. All right, we're going to drop the load. We're going to put you in that position. You're going to cue that pelvic floor better. You're going to practice it. Your body will adapt to that. You'll be better. And
right.
That's how the key's going to be.
Okay. While we're on the topic of females, you're happy with that answer?
Yeah. Well,
while we're talking about females, and I'm sure we have a lot of coaches who listen who train women as well, can we talk about training around your menstrual cycle?
Not enough of them talk about it because it's really super seriously important.
It is.
All right.
Go for it.
Now, where does it come from? Essentially, naturally, because within the cycle, as there are hormonal changes, there's effects with those hormones upon the collagen within your body. Mm-hmm. The famous sacroiliac joints that join your sacrum to your pelvis, they are affected with some women, who, especially those who've had childbirth, but others as well. But you'll tend to find within the populations, more predominantly those who have had the children will have it more often. But there will be a weakness of the collagen around about during the period time. Mm-hmm. Interesting, I have some people who work with the AFLW, and they've said that within studies they're noticing more anterior cruciate ligament injuries during period times. Mm-hmm. Yes, that associates the same problem. So we're seeing that there's a relationship between lack of muscular control and some weakness of the collagen in the ligaments. Mm-hmm. How do we train around that? That's the next question, really smartly. All right, think about the sacroiliac joint. All right, it's where, if you're standing on your feet, it's where the weight transference will go through from your hip, through your pelvis to your spine, essentially. Mm-hmm. This is the point where it happens. So don't do single leg work during that period time. Do double leg work. Okay. No single leg pressing, no step-ups. Mm-hmm. Keep that out. Move to double leg work during that time when you feel more painful or when you feel less stable. Mm-hmm. Double leg work, hey, guess what? I'm feeling okay now. Then you can move to your single leg programming outside of that time and you'll be fine. All right, so that's where there is a hormonal relationship. There is a way to approach training with it, all double leg stuff. Feet both closed chain on ground, great.
Wow, I like that. That's really interesting. That's a really good point for the women out there because it's something that we experience every month.
Because the glutes actually help close the sacroiliac joint as well as the transverse abdominis. So we do talk about ab training there. Bracing work is certainly going to assist as well. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at core work, I'd tend towards braced core work, especially going into that rather than movement core work as well. So there you are, braced core work, double leg work, great, you'll be fine.
So we're talking like the couple of days leading up to the period, when the period starts, around that time.
Yeah, usually that's about, so there's sort of like, for many people I'll say there's about up to a 5-7 day experience there where they just know they're not quite what they should be.
I definitely feel it. I will definitely feel that even when I'm going into squat and I'll say to Bass, I'm just not feeling strong, I'm just not feeling stable. I don't feel like I'm going to lift well today at all.
Yeah, so I'd even say one of my favourite exercises is the renegade row, okay? Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting one to work with because I find a lot of people really, really tighten up their core in ways they've never experienced before, and then you put them back under the bar again, they go, oh, shit, that feels better.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you use that as an activation.
So, as an activation?
Yeah. I've actually started to include that into a lot of activations for people who I've noticed with hip problems. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So for your lower body movement, so like prior to squatting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and it's a beautiful, I mean, I make it very, very strict. You can't move the body at all. You've got to be tough. I have seen people doing them with heavier weights, but they're moving their bodies too much. Mm-hmm. You've got to stay tight.
Okay.
So the tighter you get, have a go, even shoulder touch, we call it. You're into basically the push-up position. You just reach your right hand to your left shoulder and down, then to the opposite. But you've got to do it slowly, no rush. There can't be a move. Anytime you see acceleration in a movement, that should be controlled, they've lost control.
Loss of control. Mm-hmm. So something I love about everything that we've spoken about so far, it's a common theme that I know this because I work with you, and I don't want to take it for granted and just go past it. But everything you're talking about, every problem we're talking about, the solution is to strengthen something. So
it is
not to massage,
there is no question.
Not to put a pin in it, not to put some electric shock through it, or any of these types of therapies. It's a common theme with you, and that is, as you keep on saying, weakness will not be tolerated. How do you fix a weakness? Strengthen it.
As we say, that's it. We always say, there is no question that I know of to which being stronger is not a better answer.
Love it. Okay, so every time we speak to you, a lot of the times, and that's something that I do love, we'll do seminars together, and Andrew will come up to me and he'll say, I've been working on this new thing in the background. Let's try it out today. This is the first ever in back rehab, in back treatment, in pain treatment for low back, for arching in a bench press. I've got a solution for it. And you'll pull a rabbit out of a hat right in front of us, and it's like, wow, this is great. So is there anything currently that you're working on that I've not seen yet?
Absolutely. All right. Late at night, as I usually am, I will be thinking about something to do with anatomy or a patient who's walked in, and I'm thinking about something I've seen. Well, traditionally, I've actually broken down back solutions really easily, right? And it's relatively universal. I always say professionals actually know what they need to know. They're just not confident in how to apply it. They know their anatomy. There's nothing under there that no one knows. Every muscle we got, every bone we've got, the discs we know. What are people scared of? They seem to have a fear about back problems. So with backs, we have three systems. That's all you got to know. The passive system, that's your discs and ligaments. The active system, that's your muscles. And the neurological system, how those muscles move. You only have to know how to deal with those three simple things, and you will solve pretty much 99.9% of back problems. All right. Well, I'm really good on protecting the passive work, and I'll say Robin McKenzie was the revolution in this back in the 1960s. Unfortunately, I met him before he died, and wonderful, brilliant individual. Professor Stuart McGill, absolute magnificence when it comes to muscular control of the core and the integration of muscle strength and core tightening in regard to protecting the passive system. In many of the things that we write about, we forget there's a couple of other small muscles that are basically inconsequential, we almost say, which are the stabilizers. They're not even stabilizers, they're the proprioceptive muscles. Little strange names called the intertransversary and semispinal. They're little muscles. They're proprioceptive. That means they know the position of sense where your body is. That system gets disturbed in injury. And there is a new system of training that I've started to integrate, which is addressing the proprioceptive system that underlies how we move. All we've got to remember is the muscles closest to the spine should turn on before the muscles further away from the body in all movement. And it's the proprioceptive ones that do get knocked out and do sometimes misfire. If we teach them to fire better, then your movement patterns will be less painful and you'll be stronger again. So yes, I've now developed some awesomely new proprioceptive training. Fuck the wobble board. It's got nothing to do with that.
Wow. So are these going to be new routines and?
Yeah, so basically I've started to include a lot more things using bands and weights, but offset. So if I was going to give you a kettlebell that might weigh 16 kilo, good luck on this one, and I put a band around the kettlebell and I hang it off a bamboo flexi stick or a bar, especially the flexi bars, but I only put it on one side. And I'm going to get you to try and squat that. Watch what happens to your body. Everything has to stabilize so freaking hard because this thing's bouncing up and down on one side. Now, that's just one example. I do lunges with that. So you do presses. Imagine doing that with a SOTS press. Good luck. I'm going to teach your core how to know its position in space reflexively, really super well.
So this is done before
Yeah. This is almost set up as a true rehab approach for somebody who's having ongoing problems. They have to practice their patterning work. Interesting thought. Stability work doesn't build muscle. All right? It will fatigue the crap out of your nervous system. So if you spend a lot of time doing nervous system stability work, you'll be burnt out pretty fast and you won't have room for the hypertrophy training. So you've got to know that you do some of it, a little bit of it here and there, but you don't overdo it, or else your nervous system will be pretty tired and fatigued by the time you get to your major lifting. So this is a little thing I'm integrating now. Like I was doing with bench press work previously, upside down kettlebell work and pressing those in a bottoms up press.
Bottom up press, yeah.
Awesome for shoulder work. Yeah. Now if I add a band to that, I'm really making it tough on your lower body. So yeah, I've written up quite a lot of fun and videoed a few different moves. So
what I like about
about
what you're talking about, we're obviously all in lockdown at the moment, and all we're hearing from everyone is, I've got minimal equipment, I've got a kettlebell, I've got some bands, like just really simple pieces of equipment. And what you're saying is, you've got some really good ideas coming up. I'm sure a lot of people would benefit from a lot of these exercises, and using this time in lockdown to prehab, rehab, do all of those things to better themselves, so when they can get back into the gym, they can get back to achieving all of their goals. Yeah, totally.
So let me I want to continue on that. If I've got someone, and I do experience all types of athletes, some people that are really, really strong and they have minor injuries, and it's not as if it's not a really noticeable weak point. Some of these instances, they're world record holders or national record holders, and there's pain that they're not sure about why. So let's just say this pain can come from these proprioceptive muscles. How would I approach, let's just say, a deadlift session? How would I activate or incorporate these strange exercises, these balance exercises, I'm not sure what you would call them, instability exercises, before I would test, say, like a big deadlift? If it was a strong lifter,
brilliant.
Is it something that you could incorporate for someone like that?
Totally. Now, here's a thought for you. All you got to do is basically imagine your deficit deadlifts, right?
Yep.
Let's get the box a bit higher so that we can put a band on one side of the bar and we can stick a kettlebell on that band, and we'll get someone a little bit higher up off the ground so they're already, and have it on one side only. So let's say we start with simply a relatively good band that's got a bit of flex to it, and about a 10 kilo kettlebell.
On one side.
Now let's get that on one side, and let's get them working a deficit from there, and let's see how they move. That's a nice one. You could, because if they haven't got enough deficit, you could play with another pattern, which might be, say, backstepping lunges even, with the bar on their back, which is going to really challenge their core prior to moving on to the deadlift. That's a really easy one to do because you don't need to have a deficit to work from. And it's going to go single leg. So you're going to try one side, backstepping lunge forward, do a few reps, switch it around, try the other side, and then move to the bar and see how you feel. It's really good for hip problems too. Oh, wow. When you do this with people who have some hip instability, but those people are going to squat rather than lunge.
Yeah.
Because you just basically want to have them stable to start with, 2 feet in the ground.
Yeah, right.
So how are you going to be putting this new information out? Is it just on your channel?
Well, at the moment, I'm just writing it all up at the moment, and we'll certainly shoot some video work, but probably by the time lockdown's out and Sebastian and myself will be back on the road, I'll have a bit of a toolkit ready for everyone to play with.
New course content. I like it.
Oh, God, yeah.
How are you working in quarantine, Andrew? Have you been doing all your stuff online?
Yeah, well, I do some. Actually, before I spoke to you, I was treating somebody in the Netherlands, same thing, just by Skype with him. And this morning was New Jersey. So I'm basically treating most of the people around the world just by Zoom and Skype.
So good.
It's easy.
Yeah.
So I can look at a movement pattern if you give me a history, and I'll tell you what's wrong. And then I'll give you the exercises to do, and away we go. So, yeah, I've got a website that is coming up for people to be able to go to programming for rehab that will just be full of exercises, and it basically will generate the program they need. And, of course, mentoring for professionals as well. They can get that from me. So I'm putting a mentoring stream in for any sort of professional who wants to learn how to be a brilliant rehab professional.
So exciting.
I guess it's a great advantage. The way that you treat your patients isn't by poking your thumbs into them or anything that's really manual face-to-face. You can pretty much prescribe exercise to anyone, regardless of whether you're in the same room with them or not. So I guess the style of rehabilitation specialist that you are, I guess from a business standpoint, not only does it work for you, but for people that are out there thinking that exercises can't be a prescription for injury prevention or rehabilitation, kind of take note. This is the way that the world has to adapt. Who knows what's going to come after COVID-19? It's hard to predict.
COVID-20.
You got a lot of predictions out there as how everything's going to go back to normality. And I know there's going to be a lot of paranoid people that don't want to have face-to-face contact with large groups, for example. So I think so much is going to... Well, yeah, I don't want to throw her under the bus, but yeah, Felicia's probably one of them. But, face-to-face contact is maybe it's going to change. So I think that a lot of people need to kind of take note of this strategy. And it's not just because of COVID-19. It's not just because of making money. It's because it works. Strengthening a weakness is a great tool for rehabilitation, and that's why we've aligned. I just believe in everything that you do. It's hard for me to ask you these questions because I kind of know a lot of the answers because we've been working together for so long, but it's great for our audience to be exposed to you, and I'm going to have you on so many more times. There's going to be so many more topics that we want to talk to you about. I don't know where to stop.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things I'll say there too, which is really, really important, is the same way you do your work with people online where they send you videos to critique. That's all I do. I see the same thing for a different purpose. I pick a movement pattern problem from an injury point of view. You pick it from a performance point of view. That's where, as I said before, and I'd mentioned this a while ago, you are one of the two people who EMED has to be the other one. The two best people who can watch a human being under a bar and pick the problem. Two best people I've ever seen just get it. And it doesn't happen the first time you did it. It took years to develop. Years, and now it's the same sort of thing. You've seen it, and I've watched you develop over the last couple of years. You're such a different coach now. With your finesse now. It's amazing. You and Emed are two, I think, the best
Thanks, Doc.
visual figures of passion.
You're giving me a big head here.
He does have a good eye for detail. While we're talking about observations and quarantine life, have you seen any changes in the types of injuries coming about since being in quarantine, like shoulder, postural issues? What are you seeing?
Actually, what I tend to say is I'm seeing a little bit of people who are attempting to do things that they've seen other people doing in lockdown.
Like pressing a coffee table overhead.
Seriously, probably that.
Seriously,
I saw someone leg pressing a couch the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the biggest danger, I think, with lockdown is people are trying to match somebody else's performance too early.
Okay.
And they probably just need to work on some loading. They'll be locked down for long enough. Take your time and don't drive yourself into the ground it's like someone trying to do a max world record in any lift just because they've seen it on Instagram.
Yeah.
Take your time. Load up frequently, practice, and you'll be okay. But always get a good coach if you're going to do something interesting.
Of course. Be safe, guys. Be safe.
Okay, I think so we're hitting up on the time right now, so we don't want to hold you for too long, but we definitely want to have you back.
I love all of those points.
I
they
love
were
all these
really
points.
great.
There's so many more questions that we want to ask, and we get a lot of questions from our audience of what to ask you, and there's so many that we're going to save for the next time, and I know there is going to be next time. If you will be kind enough to bless us with your presence again on our show.
Before we go,
I can't wait.
Tell us where we can find you.
You can find me, well, let's say, at this point, find everything at Andrew_Lock_strength at this point, because anything I produce from there will be announced on there.
That's on Instagram.
That's the best place. Yeah, Instagram it. That's where.
And when you're
usually all my useful things.
And when you're usually practicing, you are found at which location?
At Pro Raw Gym exclusively in Doncaster and
in Melbourne, that is Victoria.
Yeah, and seriously, it will take you 6 weeks to get in to see me if you start trying to book now. So.
And what about all of the people all around the world? Do they just check out your Instagram and then DM you or email you?
DM me on Instagram. That's the place to be.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward looking forward to hearing all those wonderful people with easy problems to fix that no one else did.
Well, seriously, we've never had so many clients come to us saying there's only one person that's ever fixed me, and it's Andrew Locke.
It is definitely
like it's literally.
I said it at the start of this show.
Yeah.
People come to us and they say, I've got this problem. I went to this physiotherapist. I went to that chiropractor. And then I went to Andrew Locke, and now I'm fixed.
Yeah.
So love having you on. Love working with you. Love everything that you're all about.
Yep.
And we're sure if any of our audience want to find and learn a whole lot about you, go to his Instagram page. Thank you so much for jumping on our show, Andrew. Can't wait to speak to you soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yes, just remember, train hard and stay big, all right?
You're a legend.
We'll try. We'll try and stay big. He'll stay big for us.
Speak soon, Doc.
Doing well.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye.
See you, Andrew.